Great. Awesome. Good to see ya.
You too.
Man, we were talking about your life before. Just
We were talking
you've been
about
off on
my
a
life.
huge caper
Yes.
for the last, 10 years?
Something like this. Yes. It's been deep. It's been real.
It's been deep and real?
Yeah.
Where did it all start?
I would say it all started when I first started practicing yoga when I was 19. Yeah. It just kind of opened. I didn't really know all of these things were out there, and then it just kind of began from there, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a slippery slope from yoga, huh?
For me, it was.
Yeah,
For
fair
me,
enough.
it was. I feel like it is that way for a lot of people. For Westerners, yoga is like the doorway
Yep.
in a lot of ways.
It's like the gateway healing.
Yeah.
Where did you first do yoga?
Well, actually, it was somebody that I was dating. His dad was like this yoga master man in Carlingford area, actually.
Represent?
Yeah, represent. And like, yeah, I remember I found it super confusing at the time because he was like this really deep, quote unquote, yogi, but also like extremely terrifying. And I was like, what is this craziness? But his body and his abilities to contort it were extremely intriguing. And so I don't know, I just started practicing there, and I was going to his classes and things like this. And like the relationship itself, again, it was super ironic because the relationship was like super toxic and super crazy. But at the same time, it's like it happened because it gave me this offering of finding the practice. So I got into the practice then, and I just, haven't really looked back since.
Right. That's really interesting. I've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
First is, what was it about his body like contorting and that sort of stuff, which you found so interesting and intriguing?
Yeah, because he was like this, he's in his late 60s, I suppose, and he looked like, but he was just this, like even when he sat on the ground, I always have this image, his back was just like, he always used to sit on the ground with his legs straight out in front of him, and his spine was just like so straight, like, as if there was quite literally just this pole that was going through the center of his body. And he was so comfortable and so stable and so strong, and like just moved in such deep flexibility, but with so much ease. And you could see it resonating with certain things like his confidence and his like the projection of his voice and the presence in the room. And so I think what really drew me to that was I began recognizing the connection between like how you actually are expressing in the world through how you're carrying your body and through how your body actually is aligned.
That like mind kind of body connection?
Yeah, totally. Like that whole phenomena when, someone is really in themselves and quite depressed or, having mood issues or whatever, that thing where your spine kind of, it concaves into itself. Your shoulders are coming forward. You're looking down. You feel insecure. You feel shy. But then that thing of, okay, hold on, I'm just going to stand up straight right now, roll my shoulders back and just walk with my chest open. And there's such a difference with how you're carrying through your day. And so it was just those little things that I began noticing peppering through my life through that practice, like how I'm carrying myself, how I'm opening myself. And so I would say it was those little things from that stage that really started planting seeds.
No, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I often think just how the body itself is kind of the foundation for how we're feeling.
Yeah.
A good stable foundation, and I guess it's like a drip feed effect, something like that.
Totally. 100%. And like, I think we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, and I think about this a lot now because in the space of like wellness and psych and, all these things, now there's this big surgence of embodiment practices coming into the body. And so for all of these, like older techniques, we're talking about wisdom that's been around humanity for a long time about being in the body. But in a lot of ways, like Western culture and our contemporary age, it's like we've forgotten that we've got this body. And so they're so minded. We're so in our mind and it's so intellectualized. And so there's so much wisdom in coming back to the body, I've noticed, in terms of how that relates to our mental health and our state of being, which is why I think it's just so getting much more popular now. Everyone's like, we can't ignore the fact that these embodiment practices about the trauma is stored in the body, you got to move the body. It's all just this beautiful linked system and there's no way of separating it.
Yeah. However, still in Western society, we seem to try and separate it.
Yeah.
Do you think that has a huge impact on, I suppose, mental health?
Big time.
Yeah.
Big time. Because, you know, you can see this whether or not you're working in practice, in the rooms, whether or not you're just like really consciously listening to people's experience, your friends, your family that you're talking to. The more in their head people get, the more minded we get, the more we try to intellectualize issues, pain, sorrow, you know, anything that comes up. I think it's just more misery comes, you know, because a lot of our experience in this world is not a minded one. It's so much more than that. Like we're so much more deep as beings, as creatures. There's so many more facets to us than just intellectual knowledge, understanding. Understanding is great, but you have to do something with it. You have to, it has to be, how to say, like you've got to express it as well in life. It has to be practical.
Exactly right. We're so much more than just thinking beings, right?
Yeah.
We're connected to other people.
Yeah.
You know, some people believe we're connected to the earth
Yeah.
and all those sorts of things. Why do you think it's Western society in particular which kind of shuts down from their emotions and tends to rationalize things?
Well, I think there's so much there. It's like definitely a reflection of just our history, you know, like even coming back from, you know, the philosophical age, like to be thinkers, to be reflective, to be studious, to be academic. Like I think the frameworks on which Western society is built from are intellectual in nature. You know, it's like to be alive is to think, you know, all of these kinds of things. I think, therefore I am. So, and you can just see it in the way that our society is set up. You know, it's all about that attainment of knowledge, attainment of, achievement and understanding. And a lot of it is from an intellectual point of view. But that's, I think, just globally what's going on. You know, if we look back, like we go further and further back, ultimately like tribal people and all of this are very spiritual. It's just about our connection to each other, like you were saying, connection to the land, you know, much more being in the body. And so over time, I think it's just the way that humanity has gone in a lot of ways is, just being more minded, because our brains are just so damn complex and so, you know, the way that they evolve, there's so much going on there and there's so much that we don't understand about it. But speaking from my experience, both at work and just in the world, the more minded an individual is, the more I see that it's just the more anxiety they have as well.
Yeah, right. Because I see it in a similar way to you.
Yeah.
I do think generally when people are in their left brain more, they're more analytical kind of brain. I do see that as a trauma response, but you know, I have my biases. You know, I'll say that because of my own experiences in life and that sort of stuff. So to me, when someone is not too balanced, maybe they're too extreme in their thinking, for example, or they never show their emotions really. They keep, they don't wear their heart on their sleeve, or they keep their cards close to their chest. I always think, why? Why are they doing that? And I suppose in some ways we, you know, I guess, you know, monkey see, monkey do. I suppose we see other people in our society do certain things and we copy those things and we learn from that and that sort of stuff. But I will say that I think Western society has done a pretty good job at celebrating creatives as well. You know, like you've got your Van Goghs or your Rembrandts, and you've got your musical artists and that sort of stuff. So art seems to be, or creativity still seems to be very valued, which is obviously not necessarily the thinking part of the brain that comes from our more emotional, creative
Definitely.
side. Nonetheless, though, in the circles that I tend to go, I do see people thinking more than they're feeling, and there is a big contrast between that.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel as though, who was I speaking to? When I was just in India recently, we were talking about, I was at this ashram, meditation every day. And so we're obviously in that environment, the discussions and the talking is really deep. It's on these types of topics, and because so many people are going there in search of something. They're in distress. They're unhappy, they're lost, and a lot of these people are searching. They're looking for a way out or some kind of moment of peace or moment of connection or moment of joy. A lot of people were really lacking that experience of joy that were coming through. And so it was really interesting, and a lot of the discussions we were talking about was how, in a lot of ways, creatives and creative individuals are so much closer to this sense of connection to, for lack of a better word, I guess, how can I describe this in such a way? When we're looking for joy, in a lot of ways we could say that it's about feeling just connected to life, right? Feeling like you can sense that aliveness. There's joy, there's light, there's ease, there's all of these things. There's a sense of flow. And so, athletes talk about this sense of flow, creatives talk about this sense of flow, like just being at one with what you are doing. And so we were just discussing how in a lot of ways creatives are so close to this aliveness because they're so connected to that sense of flow. And it's like you were saying, it's that expression, it's that outlet, it's that freedom in just creating with whatever is there. And I think it is true in a lot of ways that we celebrate this so much because it's kind of what keeps humanity alive. We need these people. We need them to be, expressing with their heart on their sleeve. Otherwise, I think a lot of us will lose that joy. We need to see all these amazing, paintings and songs and poetry and all of these things. We need it because without it, it's hard to even picture what kind of humanity would be.
Yeah. I mean, man, it would look like
so grim.
So grim, man.
So grim.
So grim.
Yeah.
What would it look like? It would look like
lost. I think everybody would just be so lost.
Yeah, it would. It'd be terrible. It would be terrible. But that's why I think we value it so much because
exactly.
I mean,
we need it. We
need it, and emotionally we connect with it. It's such a huge part of people's lives. What I don't really like too much nowadays is people who maybe critique art. Like once again, it's the rationalizing coming back in.
Exactly.
It's like someone's created a beautiful
pointless thing.
Yeah. Well, people create like a beautiful painting, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we need to talk about why we like the painting and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, oh, why don't you just enjoy the painting, for what it is? Like, I don't think things don't need to be critiqued.
No.
But we do it.
And that's exactly the thing about how, of course, when we're talking about individuals, it's not as though, every individual in our society is more intellectual. Definitely not. But it's like this undertone of what we value as a society, what we value. And I think that's the whole thing about what we are valuing more is the intellectual side of things, which is why it's like, yeah, everybody is a critique. Everybody is everybody is an analyst. Everybody is, got something to say about a creation, which is neither here nor there. There's nothing to say about these things, And you can really see the valuing, I think, in just about how schools and education systems and, programs and all of this thing, arts is always the thing that gets cut. It gets cut because as a society, it's not as valued or encouraged, even though it's an absolute requirement for joy, basically, for all of us.
Exactly right. Even though it's necessary to enhance your quality of life. Like it's such a huge component of our societal fabric.
Mm.
And yeah, it's interesting. Like, why do we value intellectualizing so much? And partly, well, for me, it comes back to money. You know what I mean?
Big
it's
time.
like, you know, the people who are. It sucks to be a sportsman or a creative who is not in like the 1% of the world, because like you're amazing at what you do, but you can't earn a wage which is going to allow you to buy a house or all these sorts of things. You know, I guess from the perspective of Sydney, you're better rewarded if you're able to like rote learn and retain information and be productive and that sort of stuff. So
exactly. It's like, well, what's going to let me succeed in this life? What's going to bring me comfort in this life? Well, obviously more money. And where do you get more money? It's that sense of achievement and productivity and doing all of these, you know, like roles in society that ultimately have nothing to do with, creativity and joy and individuality and all of these things. I guess nowadays it's a little bit different. There's much more, you know, there's much more ability for us to like to start our own business and be our own boss and be innovative and creative. But again, I think like you have to be able to do it all. You have to be creative. You also have to be a great, finance person, a great tech person. You have to really understand how to use different systems. You have to be able to do all of these things. And
you got to be good at ironing shit.
Yeah, exactly. You have to get a steamer.
It's true. You can't just focus on being creative.
No.
Your energy has to go into all these other things.
All these things. And that is hard. That's intellectual. That's like organization. That's logic. That's form. That's time management. Like that's not an easy thing.
Right. It's decision fatigue. You know that thing? Like Zuckerberg and all those sorts of people wear the same clothes every day because it's one less decision.
Too much. So true.
Well, it's one less decision because they're trying to optimize how accurate they are at making decisions all day. So they wear the same thing every day so they don't need to think about that so they can think later.
Oh, man. That's so true. I definitely felt that during like the last 7 years at uni. Eventually it's like I'm just eating the same thing every day. I'm like doing the exact same thing every day, the same exercise every day, like just for that reason.
Just to get through?
Because it required so much mental energy, you know, and even organizing the day. You have all the assessments, you go to work, you got to like wake up at the right time, you got to, you know, be aware of where like when your cognitive ability is at the peak, so you do the right things at that time and save like the low energy stuff for later, and you know, maybe socialize if you can, and then like maybe talk to your family and you know, whatever, all of these things.
Probably not that, but yeah.
Maybe.
But no, it's true. You got to be so attuned.
You got to be so
yourself.
attuned.
It sounds like you were at uni. What led to you going towards psychology as a degree?
So actually I started in the most intellectual of all degrees. I was doing philosophy.
Nice. I can see you in that.
I got depressed and then
from the philosophy or before you went in?
I think from the philosophy. Okay. Like, of course, all the aspects to consciousness and, you know, like time and all of these, I was really into those themes and just like the soul and more the transcendental areas. And also what I enjoyed about it was the poetic way that a lot of these guys wrote. I really enjoyed that. But the more like existential dark aspects of it, and you know, a lot of the time some philosophers can get really grim in that, you know, things are meaningless, this life is redundant, and you know, all of these aspects to philosophical thinking that came up a lot over. I just found it really depressing because I found like it made existence very reductionist and like just super dark. It's like it was just too minded for me. It was like too minded. And so I always wanted to like work in community services and be of service, and you know, it's that very typical story. I felt like I was kind of always in that role in life of helping others and being a support person. So it felt very natural. And I didn't think that I would be able to do psych. I was like, oh, I don't have the grades and this and that. But once I was at uni, I was like, oh, I can actually transfer over and I'll be able to. let's dream big, kid. And so I just did that. And I was doing like volunteering and community service stuff at the time. And then, the path just started then.
Well, it sounds like you're always very curious about trying to make meaning.
Yes, that's super accurate. Ever since I was young, it was always like that. There's got to be more. There's got to be more. There's got to be more.
And I like what you said about philosophy becoming really reductionist because it's so logical and you're just going from logic to logic. It's like very broad to like smaller to really specific to even more specific.
Yeah.
And it is very reductionist. Sorry, it is very reductionist. I remember philosophy at uni as well. I found it really interesting just to think about these concepts. I didn't really think about them that often before I went to uni, and then when I learnt about those concepts, I found them so interesting. Actually, I lie. I did think about those things beforehand, but I suppose that now getting the information from people who were thinking about these things before me was quite interesting, and I was very curious about it. Would you say that you've always been interested in what makes people tick as well? And is that why I know that you said that you're interested in maybe like serving other people and that sort of stuff, but then why not nursing and say why psychology?
Yeah. I suppose like from a nursing point of view, it never crossed my mind because I was like, oh, I don't want to like be in a hospital or like clean people or something. Like, right. I don't know. It's like really beautiful work, but I was always like, I don't think I can do that. I don't think I have like, because it's such a incredibly, like the environment is so high pressure and so stressful and so like, I was more drawn always to what I really loved was being able to sit with someone and just genuinely help them through an issue. And I think even from a young age in high school, something that I noticed was what I really, really loved, and you could quote unquote call it something selfish, but it really feels good to help people. It feels good. Like it does something. We're meant to do that. Like as humans, like you were saying, we're community creatures. I think and I heard this, this comes up a lot in meditation too, when you're starting to feel really crappy about yourself, just go and help someone because it feels good. And I noticed like even in high school, what I really loved was the process of empowering someone for them to recognize that they're totally competent. Because a lot of the time people get stuck in this idea that they don't have the competence to actually get through an issue, to tackle an issue, to face. It's too hard. It's too painful. I can't do it. I can't. This narrative in the mind of I can't. I'm lacking. And I always just loved sitting with someone through an issue and seeing the change in realizing that, I actually have the skills to do that. I'm competent, or that just that sense of empowerment. And that happened a lot at Lifeline. I was there for like 4 years. And one of the main parts of the framework was empowering other people, because this is a huge reason why like people are depressed and lonely and isolated, is because they really just don't feel like they have the ability to take themselves out of the darkness.
Yeah, it's that hopelessness and helplessness that you really feel when you're depressed. I think it's really noble. You know, I do think it's really noble helping others, but selfishness doesn't necessarily have to be a negative thing.
No.
You know? And I think in the way that you just framed it, for me personally, what's noble about it is that you're helping someone realize their own agency. You know, for you yourself, did you ever struggle with your own agency?
Interesting. I think in many ways, you know, going on a personal path of like healing and discovery and all these things, there's always so many layers that you uncover about yourself. And over time, those same layers all of a sudden look different, and it deepens and it changes. So of course, as individuals, we have really similar experiences generally. And I think a lot of young people probably go through their years not feeling like they have much of a voice and they're people pleasing. I think that's like a really common thing that we share. You know, I know for sure like a lot of women I've spoken to have gone through that, but I mean, there's really not much difference between the experience of men and women if you really get to the nitty gritty of it. Like, and so definitely I was in a people pleasing thing for a long time. And I saw that very much reflected in romantic relationships. And it was a pattern for sure, big time. And so over the years, I watched it evolving and it was really reflected. I think like when you're doing the inner work, you can see it in your outer world where it's going because it's attracted in how your interactions are, your relationships and this kind of thing. It's really reflected. So I had that theme in my life, definitely. And I also got extremely depressed. In 2023, I was really in darkness, big time. And I was really, you know how depression works. It feeds itself. It feeds itself with negative reinforcement, you know, like, and so you don't really do much and then you feel shitty about not doing much and then you say, I'm not doing anything and then you feel worse and then, you know, then you see you do less. So it's just this cycle that happens and definitely I felt a loss of agency in that time and so much self-doubt was really evident in my state of mind. And that was a new feeling for me. I think I probably had it in the background and a lot of the time mental health crises, quote unquote, can really bring things up that were kind of chilling in the background that you were able to push aside and not really look at. You don't have to look at them when you're running super well. It's like, oh yeah, I can feel that, but I'm good because things are happening in life and I'm sweet with them. But I really had to look at all these things that were there. So in a lot of ways, I'm quite thankful that I did lose a sense of urgency at that time. I digressed a lot, but that's what came up.
Wow.
Yeah.
It sounds like first of all, it sounds like a difficult time.
Yeah.
Like a really difficult time. Going back to what you were saying about people pleasing, because I think that's such a common thing for people to do. And really at its core, I mean, in relationship, you're talking about people pleasing and what I understand that to be is, well, I'm going to meet this person's needs and I'm not going to get my own needs met. And if you look at that a bit further, well, for myself, this was true that when we were people pleasing, that's also associated with the repression of emotion. Okay. You know, and I say repression and not suppression because suppression is where we consciously say to ourselves, okay, I'm feeling upset right now. I'm at work. I'm going to push that down and I'll come back to that later. So I consciously push it down. Whereas repression is, well, we're so out of touch with our own emotions that we unconsciously start to push down. And I mean, so with those two things, I guess in relationship with each other, people pleasing and repressing emotions, you also mentioned the depression. And for me personally, I've had my own experiences with depression and I don't know how yours felt for you personally, but for me it was, yeah, like probably the most terrible time of my life. And I don't know what your thoughts are on depression, but for me, because of my own journey, I work a lot with, you know, adaptation and that sort of stuff. And for myself, what I realized was my repression of emotions that led to the adaptive coping mechanism of depression coming along, because essentially for me, I'd had so much stuff buried down that it had started to surface, you know, like a volcano. You can only hold so much down, right? And what makes sense to me is what Gabor Mate says about depression and that sort of stuff being an adaptive coping mechanism to try and keep what's down further, because if it all came up at once, it would be too unsafe. And what depression does, I suppose, is what it dulls our emotions. You know, it really shuts us off further in the hopes that we survive. But what I realized for me is it doesn't just shut us off and let us remain peaceful. It creates a new issue, and that's the helplessness and the hopelessness, and the feeling terrible. So it's just interesting that these were kind of the themes for you. It just made me think a little bit about my own process.
Absolutely. And I think that's what I mean about how, for the most part, a lot of us are experiencing shared, we have shared experiences when it comes to like these periods of darkness and periods of pain and our experience in the world. Because I think what I really love about these new frameworks, like people like Gabor Mate are bringing to light, that there's nothing wrong with us. It's that our body and our brain and our mind are looking for effective ways of coping. They're protective factors. They're not trying to hurt us. It's not against us. It's really the best that we can do to protect ourselves. And these mechanisms are formed usually when we're really young because we don't have the ability to do anything else. This is the skills that we have. And the reason they feel so terrible as we age and we get older, it's because it's like, hey, your body's trying to tell you a message like, hey, this was really effective before, but it's not working for me anymore. So I got to find something new to do. I got to find a different way of protecting myself. And yeah, what came to mind while you were speaking then was, something that's I'm really resonating with in the space of mental health and psych and just these new frameworks for trauma and this kind of thing, which is really echoed in, internal family systems as well, is that all of these mechanisms that we develop with anxiety, depression, even ADHD, of course, as we know, Gabor Mate is a big proponent of this, is that these quote unquote bad traits that
these pathologies.
These pathologies are actually like our bodies and our brains doing their best job in trying to protect us from the pain that we don't feel or we don't feel competent to face. We don't feel safe to face them. And what I really love about the frameworks is it allows us to generate a really compassionate voice towards ourselves that mitigates a lot of the things that make mental health worse, like the harsh inner voice, the inner critic, the the guy that's trying to get us away from other people, the thing that wants to isolate, because those things make it worse. But if we bring in that compassionate tone of understanding towards these mechanisms, it can really help you understand that I'm going through this darkness for a reason. There's a message here and it's telling me that something is out of line. I've suppressed something. I haven't expressed my truth, or, something in my life is just not right. And, I really just find them to be such valuable ways of looking at phenomena in mental health now. And that's something that I really love about contemporary, ways of looking at mental health.
What you touched on is so important, I think. And really what it is it's realizing that nothing's wrong with you. Nothing's wrong with you. This response is a normal response to an abnormal situation. And that's one bias I have against like the DSM personally, is it doesn't really address those types of things.
We could go deep into that discussion big time, but yeah.
Maybe we'll see. But yeah, it's instead of saying the DSM, for example, is instead of saying what's wrong with you, the trauma-informed lens is what's happened to you.
Exactly.
And that's a really important distinction, and because I think you touched on it before, for people who are struggling with their lives, a lot of the time they haven't realized their capacity for agency. And when you learn that something's wrong with you, then that just reinforces that narrative that, I'm inadequate, I can't do anything about it, et cetera, et cetera. So when you realize that actually all along you've been an extremely important tool in your own survival, insofar as the adaptations that your body, that you have unconsciously been making to put up with your situation, there's invaluable power in that, and there's a lot of courage, and there's a lot of competency. And yeah, I feel that when you start looking at yourself as someone who's experienced hardship as opposed to, being inadequate, that's where that self-compassion can really come in. And often that's the antidote, because if we were loved more in the ways that we wanted to be loved or needed to be loved as children, then we, in my opinion, we wouldn't be facing the things that we normally are facing.
Oh, I love everything that you just said. I feel like it's just so incredibly true, and really, like, it seems so simple in so many ways that the antidote, like you said, and the answer to so much of us coming out of pain and difficult times and darkness and these periods of hardship is as simple as just changing, even the wording, just changing the perspective of something that's more skewed towards negativity in its language and meaning, but something more to do with what it is that we actually have, what it is that we've actually done. And that, just to give an example, when I was at Lifeline on the phone, so we're talking about crisis support here. So people are usually really, really distressed, and it might be at the moment of suicide. It might be at, there's many different moments that this crisis comes up. But a lot of the time it's just people that are very, very depressed. And, something that was always just so powerful and so effective in these short calls, anonymous calls, it's not even about having to know someone for hours. It's not required. But if you're truly listening and you're truly taking note of what the person is saying, all it takes is one simple statement, which is basically what you've been echoing in that beautiful response, was so something along the lines of, so it sounds like no one else has actually gotten you this far, and you've pretty much been the only person that's got you here. You've gotten yourself out of bed every day. No one else did that. You overcame the hardest thing in the world last year of whatever, you lost your child, or you were extremely depressed for the last 10 years, but you're still here. Even though you really don't want to be here, you're still here because of X, Y, Z. No one else has done that for you. No one else has held down that job and raised the children, and, all of these incredibly amazing things that someone is withstanding during the time of utter darkness. And, and you reflect that back to them. So what I'm hearing is that you did that.
Right.
Is that right? And they're like, well, and you can just see this total shift because they've been so deeply trapped under this narrative in their mind about this lack of competency. And I'm a failure. I can't do anything. How can I do this? And, and they're totally missing because it's just a skew. It's just a negative skew. It's not real. And because no one is telling them every day, like, hey, you're doing this.
Yeah.
You're doing this.
It's true. It's that little reframe helps them see the truth, because
exactly
they're missing the truth. Life has led them on this path where unfortunately they're just not seeing what's really happening.
And that's what the brain does. That's what the brain does. And if we understand that our brain is naturally negatively biased, that's just what happens. From when we're so young, we're always negative, like, okay, where's the danger? What's the problem? Like, always kind of looking for these things from an evolutionary point of view. But it can be the other way. And with depression and anxiety, it feeds on that negativity. So it gets more and more and more and more skewed towards confirmation bias as well, to these ideas that I have about myself. Yeah. I'm stupid. So if I fail, whatever. See, there's more evidence for that. Got it. Stronger. So it's like this continuous cycle that, we're unconsciously participating in life. And sometimes all it takes is a really simple reframe. And maybe it's somebody else you speak to on the phone for 20 minutes if you call, Doesn't have to be anyone significant, but it can be so simple like that. Just so simple.
I think if people want to live more fulfilling lives from a Western perspective or a Western lens, I think it's really valuable becoming aware of these unconscious processes.
I think so too. Like, I think anyone that's done anything to do with healing or seeking mental health support or anything, number one thing is always like, let's become aware. What's going on here? Let's notice. Let's notice what you're doing, what's going on, because ultimately more awareness leads to more freedom from these unconscious things that are ultimately like causing all this pain, keeping us stuck, getting us stuck in loops, in, you know, unhealthy habits, all of these things. With more awareness, you see it all and you can eventually come out of them.
And it sounds ironic because we were like, you were bashing. No, we were both, you know, we were talking about our reservations with intellectualizing everything, but there is a balance that you need to find.
Of course there is a balance, and I would never say that you have to totally like cut off a human's head in order for that human to be like a happy person or whatever, or be living in freedom. I don't think so. I think the point is for me at least, and this is something that meditation does, because mindfulness is awareness. That's what mindfulness is. It's about bringing awareness to what is happening, bringing awareness to the present moment, bringing awareness to what you're eating, bringing awareness to what you're doing, to your walking, to your driving. It's just bringing awareness to things. So I actually wouldn't even consider awareness to be an intellectual thing.
Right.
It is minded in the sense that you need a mind to do it. But in a lot of ways, I think the intellectualization of awareness comes from the processes that are happening afterwards, like the judgment or the attachment or, you know, the meaning making afterwards and that kind of thing, which I don't think are bad. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think what gets people stuck is the attachment to things. It's like, okay, is anger bad? No. But what is bad is staying attached to this sensation and holding the anger and holding the resentment and holding these things. This is when it gets bad. And so, yeah, like we're talking about awareness. And I do think that there is definitely no reason when we're talking about intellectualizing versus not, is to say that some of these human processes are good and some of them are bad. We have to take it all. We have to accept it all and work with it all. And balance is always the key to all of this stuff. Because sometimes when I talk to people, and in clinic I saw this too, I'm like, you're being way too aware. There's too much awareness here, because it can go into this thing of being so hyper fixated on every thought that they have. They're noticing, well, I thought this and I thought that and I thought that. Does this mean this? Does it mean that? Does it mean it? And then it was kind of getting stuck in that, you know, that attachment. It's kind of hard to explain.
Well, it's just become another coping mechanism.
It's another thing, exactly. So it's just too much of whatever it is where the issues come from. And it's always the balance. And I think, in so many ways, it's balancing the intellectual with the creative. It's balancing the awareness with the letting go. It's balancing the, you know, the logic with the opposite of that.
Exactly right. And because the logic's super important.
Of course.
You know, logic and emotion. You need both. We need both. That's why we have them, right? Because, you know, your sentiment before on anger. And for example, you know, I think your words were, it's, you know, it can be bad when we become attached to anger. Like anger is a very healthy emotion, obviously. You know, it's there because when our boundaries are encroached, we know, and we're able to push back. You know, it's, I guess, a safety tool. But when people get too attached to that anger, it stays with them. That's when it can be a bad thing. However, you need the intellectual capacity to distinguish between what that looks like, right? Because just because, you know, some people will comprehend that as, I just need to push that anger down, never touch it. When that just, right, that just starts a new thing. That's a new problem that you're creating, right? So it's recognizing that yes, we need not be attached to those emotions, but we need to process the emotion in order for it to disappear, as opposed to just like pushing it away when it hasn't had its time to.
It needs to be
process.
expressed. It needs to be expressed. Emotions are there to be expressed. As soon as we do something that suppresses them in some way, that's when they begin to control us. That's when they begin to, you know, like totally, or control is probably not the greatest word to use, but I think when it comes to things like anger, if it is suppressed and we're holding it in our body and it's stored there year after year after year, because a lot of people have big issues with expressing anger. We're taught not to. This is the whole thing. Same as sadness. You know, don't cry, don't cry. All of these things.
Don't feel bad.
Don't feel bad. Yeah, it's fine, you know. And so where does the sadness and anger goes? We swallow it. It's just stored in our bodies, in our chest, in our throat, in our gut, like it's in the body. And when I say control, what I mean is that the more that we store it and don't express it and don't look at it because we're scared or taught not to, it does control you in a sense. You might actually be unconscious of it, but it controls, you know, how you are operating in the world. It controls, you know, when every now and then someone might just totally lash out and not understand. It's because that's been stored in your body, you know, and then it's trying to find a way out. And so people lash out or they get extremely emotional about things that are out of proportion to the occurrence. You know, all of these things happen. And for me, that's what I'm talking about when I say it controls you. And it can also just change the internal landscape that you have. And so absolutely we need a way to express and we need to understand what our emotions are trying to tell us, because that's what they are. They're these really helpful messengers, and they're on our team and they're trying to tell us when something is happening, something is wrong, something doesn't feel good, and something in our environment is, you know, is not right. And I think, in so many ways we haven't been given the tools to know how to understand and express emotions in a healthy way. And in doing that, I'm in the mindset that expression of emotion is absolutely fundamental. And then once emotions, you have the practice to express them, you have the capacity to then understand them. Because when you're still holding on to them and you haven't got that ability to be free with them, how on earth can you do the work to understand them? You know, because they're shoved into your body and they're totally like creating all this tension. And but I think expression is key. Expression is key.
Well, that makes sense to me. Why one would have to experience the emotion in order to like cognitively process it.
Exactly.
Because you need to find some type of association. You know, you can't just. I mean, I suppose if you're aware of the emotion, you can talk about the emotion and that sort of stuff. But in general, if you have never felt the emotions that you've repressed and you're unaware of them, you need to feel them in order to then work through them.
Makes sense, for sure. For sure.
Why do you think some people get attached to anger? Like, what is that? Because before you were saying, well, we were talking about anger and, well, if people just experience and experience the emotion and once you're done with it, I suppose experiencing it, you can let it go. So why do some people stay attached?
Gosh, that's such a huge question. I feel like there's so many ways to answer that. Why would somebody stay attached to an emotion like anger and hold on to it? The key thing that comes to my mind is resentment. You know, I think in a lot of ways people, because of our experiences as children and how we're taught to be people pleasers, how we're taught to control our anger and not hurt anyone's feelings and not say this and not do that and not cry. So from such a young age, I think this resentment builds. And it's not necessarily towards anybody in general, but it's almost this injustice in the world. Like I have to do all this work. I don't get to be honest about my feelings. I have to put other people before me. I have to be nice. I have to do this. I'm angry about that. So when the anger comes up, you know, it's like really hard to let go because I think it's a sense of injustice. I think that injustice is a big one for people, and it's really hard to let it go. But I mean, there's so many ways to answer that because I think there's so much to do with relationship dynamics. There's so much to do with, you know, relationships with parents, relationships with, you know, yourself, with your siblings, with your friends, relationships with the world. There's just so much there about why it is people hold on to emotion and particularly anger. And I think that it's so hard to separate. I think a lot of it is relational. So much of it is relational.
I think it is really convoluted, and this might sound reductionist, but what I'm hearing there is it really comes down to those emotions haven't been expressed, and therefore they stay in the body.
I feel that.
Yeah. I think fundamentally, like, that's kind of what it is. Because as you said, I could leave here, drive down the road, someone cuts me off, and I could get out of my car and bash that person. You know what I mean? And then if you ask yourself objectively, like, how much anger, you know, really is justified in this situation out of 10, you might, with 10 being like getting out of your car and bashing this person, you might be like, oh, like a 1 out of 10. You know what I mean? Like, he made a mistake. So it's like, well, where did this 9 out of 10 anger come from?
Exactly.
And, you know, I think it comes from the past.
Definitely.
You know, it comes from experiences where we had to hold in that anger. We couldn't express it. It wasn't safe to. We were told it was bad, etc. And all of a sudden, it's been given kind of a pathway to come out just for a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, I guess this speaks to kind of the control you were talking about, the control our unconscious emotions have over us.
Yeah.
Because we don't have any control in those types of situations, irrespective of maybe what the courts will have you believe. So yeah, for me, it's, I think this ties back into healing, right? Of emotions and big emotions, especially, which are affecting us and affecting the quality of our life. So it's all about going back into the past, experiencing the emotion, and then cognitively processing that emotion. So you're no longer carrying it. And then if someone cuts you off in traffic, it's going to be a 1 out of 10 anger response instead of the 10 out of 10 that you felt before, because you can't get triggered if there's no emotions from the past coming back into the present moment.
Exactly. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think so much about mental health these days and what so many of us just are not taught and what's missing is just that ability to actually just express and unburden ourselves, like, with all this stuff that we've been accumulating every day for years. And it's little things, you know, it doesn't have, it starts, if we start talking about what started when we're a baby and what we're like learning from that point on, every day since then, things have been accumulating, tensions and unspoken pain and tears not cried and, you know, frustration not let out. And this is every day. And so absolutely number one key is expressing and learning how to continue expressing and unburdening ourselves. So it's almost like you're cleaning out the closet, so to speak, you know, doing the work. And I just think that and that's why therapy, half the time, it's just the process of unburdening yourself. It's just the process of word vomiting and getting it out and someone witnessing that expression. Expression is everything. And sometimes that's enough, you know?
It is.
Yeah.
It is enough for some people,
Yeah.
I find, or for certain issues that you might have. It's enough just to be validated, just to be heard, just for those things to be seen.
And the act of saying things that you've never said, the act of, you know, and that's all, it all comes down to this thing of expression, letting something out and unburdening yourself from all this tension that you're carrying.
Exactly right. So what do you think gets in the way of people hearing people express themselves?
Conditioning. The same reasons that people usually don't express themselves is the reason that people are uncomfortable hearing the expression, is because we're taught that a lot of it is inappropriate and rude and uncomfortable and, you know, whatever it is. So if someone's angry, it's almost like we have this feeling of how, you know,
Yeah,
this
suck
person
it
is
up.
so disrespectful. Like they're just being angry in front, like
Right.
exactly.
I hear suck it up a lot from males.
Yes, suck it up.
And,
Yeah.
And for me personally, that comes back to that projection of, I think maybe what it stems for some people is that they're frustrated that nobody has listened to them.
To them, exactly.
Therefore, why should we listen to you?
Listening to you, yeah.
Exactly right. And once again, it's like that person's not even angry at that person.
Yeah.
They're just angry at maybe their parents or whoever it was that didn't allow them to express their anger and validate it.
Totally. Because if you ask, and this is that thing of so much is in our unconscious. It's like you ask someone like, why do you even care what they're saying? Why do you even care that person is having an emotion right now? And people don't even realize, like, we have so much opinions about the other people's expression of, if someone's expressing anger in public or frustration and other people are really bothered by it. It's like, why? Do you even realize why? Like, why are you even bothered by this? But that's exactly the thing. It's because to me, it's quite clear that so many of us are just carrying so much of this unspoken pain, unresolved trauma. Stuff is in the body that has not been expressed. All the triggers are just so in there. And so everyone's just out there triggering each other, and you can see it online as well. This is why I can't use social media. I haven't been able to for years and years because you just see like the way that people are interacting with each other and are so damn triggered. It's like, what? It's craziness,
What comes up for you when you see it?
It's just like, what comes up for me? I feel like I'm infecting my brain. I'm just putting all this totally useless content and totally meaningless stuff in my head, basically.
Well, the other day, I was talking to a friend about the fact really that, you are the 5 closest friends you have, or you are what you eat. And yeah, of course, like to some extent, whatever you engage with, whatever you are exposed to, is going to infect you in some sort of way. And
it's the information that you're putting in your brain at that time. And if we think about what we've been talking about this whole time, you are nothing but a product of every experience that you've had till now. Like, we are pretty much blank. And depending on who your parents are, where you live, all the millions of variables in this life, that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so it's really much more important, I think, than people realize what it is that they're putting into their head every day. And we're talking about every day people are in, whether they're reading it, engaging. I'm not by any means saying that social media is bad. I don't think that. But I'm talking about the way that people engage on it can be extremely horrific. And we get so desensitized to the nature of these things when we use it regularly. But because I don't use it, if I do see it, it feels like a slap in the face.
Right.
It's so intense.
But that's its own superpower. You kind of living in actual reality, and then you come back to social media and you can call a spade a spade.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Whereas a lot of people would just be like, oh, that's just normal.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's how people are. It's like,
that's
that's
society.
not how people are. This is just
That's the people in
look at
your
this
algorithm.
trigger zone, like the most triggered people that are feeling so elevated they have to actually have a full-on interaction with a total stranger online about nothing.
And a lot of the time it's just them abusing each other.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Literally, it's them abusing each other.
So,
look at the politics nowadays.
oh my gosh.
No one's talking about no one's talking about the actual I'm having a mind blank. What's it called? Their policies and that sort of stuff. All they're doing is trying to defame the other person.
Yeah. That's what politics
that's what
apparently
it is.
now.
Let's just defame the other person's character.
Yeah.
But the reason I think that they do it is because they know it works.
That's right.
Because people are so used to associating self-worth with criticism and that sort of stuff that if someone's being criticized, well, that's right. They must be less. You know what I mean?
That's the psychology of it all for sure. It's just such a funny little corner of society that we have. But yeah, I can't remember why we got onto the social media thing. I must have just brought that. Oh, talking just about how triggered, the state of being triggered that, we're in. I think to me, the reason I said that was because I think it's a very clear reflection of the degree in which we are holding on to resentments and emotions. And the key through a lot of this stuff is through expression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. But expressing it not like
Not
people
like
do on
this.
social media.
No. Healthy ways.
Expressing it in a respectful,
Yes.
healthy way. Or at least, you know what? More maybe that's not the right thing to say, more power to those people on social media getting their shit out. But it's kind of like, in a way, like I'm compassionate with these people because they don't have the capacity to get their shit out in a healthy way. So if I was in their position without the capacity to get my shit out in a healthy way, would I do the same thing? Probably. So I think it's really important that maybe if you are unaware of yourself doing that, to maybe take heed to this and to try and learn how to communicate healthily, you know, because as you said, we all have the capacity. The people that you've spoken to on Lifeline, et cetera, at different times, they forget that and they don't believe they have the capacity. But with a little bit of training, a little bit of education, you know, they certainly have the competence and capacity to live their lives healthily. And that entails like healthy communication, healthy emotional expression, all those types of things, which is really important. Just quickly, what's your takes on addiction and why people get addicted to things? And for example, the rise in social media addiction nowadays.
I mean, really, really simply and broadly, addiction to anything, you can definitely see it as a way to not have to look at what's there in that moment. It's simply like a really effective way of coping with reality when the distress and the pain of it is just simply too much to bear in that moment. How it develops and forms, I think, is not so. I think addiction is that insidious thing because it creeps up on people, right? And it creeps up because in a very broad sense, like all of us have insecurities and, you know, some things that we're afraid of and maybe low self-esteem, not super confident and, you know, these things that we all have in life. And so whether it's, like addiction to social media or porn or a substance or anything like that or smoking, first we get that really like effective temporary relief. But, you know, just like any form of addiction, it's insidious because what we're getting away from gets bigger over time as the addiction. It feeds itself. Again, you know, you have more guilt and shame that creeps in because of the thing that you're using as a coping. So the guilt and shame gets bigger, so you use that thing for coping more and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So I think, very simply, it's just a way to get out of the pain of whatever reality that you're living in. And it's effective because the dopamine is just so damn strong. And, you know, it's the reward system. It's how it works. It always wants more. And, you know.
So in other words, it's a coping mechanism.
For sure.
It's an attempt to solve a problem, which is often suffering or lots of stress. And initially you were saying that although it does alleviate stress in the short term, it then creates more problems in the long term.
Yeah.
Why do you think some people become addicted to substances or things or behaviors and other people don't?
Well, that comes up a lot. And I think actually if you look at people really, everyone is actually addicted to something. Like just because it's not, you know, like heroin or alcohol, we tend not to look at it so much. But I think if people really took a look at themselves and what they're using in life for coping, it can be a lot smaller. It can be caffeine, coffee, like eating, sugar.
Definitely.
Exercise. Like if you really look at what is the nature of addictive behavior, it's present in pretty much most people's lives. And I think it only becomes really evident when the behavior that in question is extremely destructive, and destructive in the sense that it gets in the way of the external life, family, relationships, money, the things that actually disable somebody, But exercise, for example, well, that's great, especially now we're in the fitness era. It's awesome to be, at the gym 5, 6, 7 days a week. So it's not always going to be looked at as an a problematic addiction or something. And I think that's reflected in a lot of behaviors.
Right. For me though, it's distinguishing what addiction is, because I think a huge factor in addiction is this thing has become unhealthy, and despite knowing how unhealthy it is, you cannot stop.
Continuing, yeah.
You can't stop. Like despite your best efforts, you cannot stop. So although there are people who might have coping mechanisms and that sort of stuff that do alleviate stress, I think there are a lot of people who can stop that particular behavior.
Yeah.
If they have become aware of it, meaning I don't think those people are necessarily addicted. Do you think that there's some merit to people who have developed a secure attachment in early relationships with their caregiver? Caregivers are less prone to becoming addicted later in life.
Like intuitively, it sounds like something is there. I don't know enough about if there's been like studies or evidence or anything like that to support that connection. It sounds as though it makes sense. I feel like individuals that have grown up in a secure attachment relationship with their caregivers tend to have less of all the issues, right? Like they're really blessed with being like pretty regulated emotionally and pretty balanced in a lot of ways, and don't have a lot of these extreme manifestations of distress and trauma responses and things like that. So it sounds like that could possibly be the case. And I think you're right in what you said before. Like definitely some people don't have the issue of being problematically addicted to things. I think what I was meaning was that I think it's probably more evident than we think in terms of like they're addicts and everyone else isn't. I think there's a spectrum of addiction, as like we're discovering there pretty much is a spectrum of everything.
Well, it's the nuance, right?
Yeah,
it's not black and white.
It's not categorical, and nothing about us is categorical.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I do think, people that had more volatile upbringings, people that learnt more quote unquote unhealthy ways of seeking self-regulation and things like that growing up are probably more prone to being addicted because they haven't been I guess lucky enough to be offered a different skill set from an early age of how to go about it.
Right. And I think it's also the impact that it has on your neurochemistry. Like for example, the brains of someone who's securely attached versus insecurely attached are completely different.
It's totally different.
And therefore, for example, let's just say I jump on social media late at night and I get a hit of dopamine. That's going to be very different for, for someone who, for example, already has a dopamine deficit, versus someone who doesn't have a dopamine deficit. Like the pull is not going to be that strong.
Totally.
If you already feel good in your life,
it's not doing much for me. It's whatever. Yeah,
exactly right. For me, in the way that I've come to understand it a little bit more, I think about the distance between what the addiction's giving you versus like your baseline. If your baseline is extremely terrible and then all of a sudden this thing makes you feel really good, then naturally you're going to want to do that thing all the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
But if you're a bit closer, if you feel good and this thing makes you feel a little bit better, but it's, it's not too much of a difference, then
you're not getting that physiological effect.
Exactly.
For sure. I totally agree. And I think also there's a lot to say about what the current life situation of an individual might be. You might have someone that's like really in their life has been quite regulated and, pretty balanced from a young age, but perhaps they're going through a total crisis and like somebody died in their life and they've lost their, like, you know, the actual circumstances of their life are so bad
Yep.
and they're in a state where their whole, you know, life is in upheaval, they're going to be much more susceptible, you know?
It's important you bring that up because, there are certain events later in life that are extremely traumatic for somebody, which have huge effects on that person. And, based off the reading I've been doing recently, it's if you have a secure attachment, you are – what was it? You are more adaptive to stress, and which therefore – and adversity, which therefore makes you more resilient. So even if something traumatic happens, you're less likely to come away from that
being totally shattered.
Exactly right. And I think there have been studies done on like, soldiers who have gone off to war, and it's like, why do some people develop PTSD and why do others don't? And a lot of the time it comes back to their relational upbringing and that sort of stuff.
It makes total sense. And you can pretty much like, I think most people can pretty much agree on the fact that if things were fairly secure and balanced at home from a young age, that's the framework from which your entire life comes from.
Yeah.
Like we can't like deny any of that. People that had a secure attachment and a healthy, like, you know, moderately healthy time growing up are pretty much like, you know,
it's advantageous.
It's advantageous in pretty much every way. Yeah. And that's just like, you know, that's just the nature of things. It's just how it goes.
Exactly right. And I think the reason why I think it's important to talk about these things is for people who have no awareness of their upbringing or why it is they're doing certain things and all of a sudden they find themselves addicted to things. Well, it's like find someone which can help you, or find someone who can help you kind of traverse back into the past because you're going to find some answers for why you are doing things the way that you are now. All right. I've got a couple of questions or a few questions just to finish off for you, which I normally ask at the end of the podcast.
All right.
Yeah.
Hit me.
Open and willing? Hit you. Okay.
Yeah, do it.
What psychological modalities do you like the most and do you believe are effective in healing?
Okay. A few things have come to mind. What I'll say first is I think what is the most effective in healing is humanity. And I don't think that that is something that depends on a specific modality or not. I think it is about a practitioner being wise, being attentive, being integrative, and being individualized and meeting the client where they are and not trying to put a framework onto the client. That's such a fail in my opinion.
So someone who's attuned to you.
Yes, attunement. Attunement is like my favorite word in the world. I think attunement is the key because…
No pun intended. Tune key.
Oh, I miss that, dude. I totally miss that.
That's unlike you. Sorry for rudely cutting you off.
I would say, at this point early in my career and this kind of thing, modalities that I'm more drawn to, I would say at the moment, internal family systems, is what I'm drawn to the most at the moment.
What draws you to it?
The compassion. I find that it is such a beautiful and compassionate way of approaching mental health. I am drawn to the fact that it is quite clearly like a very spiritual framework in a lot of ways. And people get all seized up when they hear that word, but it's like, okay, let's just be realistic about what spiritual means. It just means that there's more than this body and this mind. It just means that there is, something that is joining all of it together and that there might, and, there's just a sense that's beyond the brain. And that's the way that I look at it, that I think most people can at least resonate with a little bit, because in it there's the concept of the self, and the self is like the integrated quote unquote higher self that is what you're kind of aiming for. Like it's the you that is healed. It's the you that's integrated. It's the you that is, you know, joyful behind.
It's your best self.
It's your best you know. So I'm drawn to it because it's, incredibly compassionate. It's got a spiritual sense to it. And it doesn't look at any pathologies like a pathology. It looks at every aspect of the self as a protective and or useful and lovable aspect.
And just to be clear, internal family systems is a parts framework.
It is a parts framework.
So meaning we're made up of many different parts. And essentially along the way, some of those parts are maybe pushed away or exiled, I think is the term.
Yeah, they're
that is
exiles,
used.
yep.
And it's all about reintegrating those parts to create your best self.
And that we've got these parts that have very specific roles, like anger and the drinker, the guy that drinks, the guy that fights, the guy that's aggressive, the one that's sarcastic, the one that's really funny, the one that's, they all have these very specific roles, and most of them are to protect us. They have a purpose. They're doing something for us in this world. And they developed, usually when we're really young, as ways of engaging safely and surviving.
Yeah.
And so it's about understanding those parts, understanding what their job is in the system, that is your internal system, and coming at them with so much compassion and talking to them, because we don't do that. We don't really go and try to understand like, hey, you keep blasting this person in my life and I really want to understand why. It's like, oh, I hate that part about myself. I hate it's very separate, Yep. And so, it's the purpose is to become integrated and become whole and understand our parts with compassion. I love that.
Yeah, no, it is really cool. I do a lot of parts work myself personally. It's more eclectic though than just IFS.
Yeah.
My therapist, he's trained in family systems.
Yeah.
And then also does parts work.
Yes. And that's how it developed. The guy that developed the framework was a family therapist to begin with. So
exactly right.
It's a mirror. It's no difference. Yeah.
I'd say that I wouldn't say there's no difference, but there's it's nuanced, but there are certainly crossover concepts. Which are really important. Wonderful, good to hear. What's something that you wish you knew earlier in life?
Something I wish I knew earlier in life. That it's not so damn serious, basically. Like,
what do you mean?
I was talking to many people about this recently, how the older I'm getting, I'm just noticing the less serious I'm getting. Like, I just used to be so serious, like reading this and I have to understand this and world issues and this thing and, you got to be part of this and doing that and reading that and knowing this. It's just very serious, like my attitude to life and reading very deep philosophical books and smoking cigarettes and drinking black coffee and, just being really serious about this existence. And I just feel like it's not.
Especially if you're not a serious person as well, right?
Yeah, and I'm not. Like, I just feel like it's so much more simple and it's really just about joy and joy and happiness and laughter and like really simple things like this. And I don't think I knew that.
Very cool. When you say joy and happiness, what do you mean by that?
I mean, joy is joy. And this is the thing that about the seriousness and the definitions and the thing. Joy is just joy to me. Like it's not defined by any particular thing. Like each person knows what it is when they experience it. And I think if we're just being honest with ourselves and you think, when was I joyful? If you think back to that time, it'll just be like a really naturally easy flowing, like usually laughter will be there or connection will be there or your close people will be there and it'll just be very evident to you what it is.
So what you're talking about is genuine joy.
Yeah.
Okay. It's like doing things in my life which which I know I enjoy, which bring
Yeah,
me
they're bringing
genuine
you
joy.
joy. Yeah.
Right. Okay. When's a moment that you felt proud of yourself?
Ooh. Hmm. I would say, like this current time that I'm living in right now, I feel proud of myself because I'm embarking on a chapter in my life that I have put off for a long time because of obligations, shoulds, duties, jobs, and like there was always many reasons not to. And I think that's a shared experience for a lot of people. So I've pretty much just like, left my whole life behind and I'm embarking on a journey. I don't have a house. I don't have things. I don't have furniture. I'm pausing my career. I got no ties and no, I'm just following a sense of freedom, and something that I have been yearning for a long time is following this particular path. And I'm really proud that I'm doing it. I got a one-way ticket and I don't know what's coming. Yeah.
Are you proud because it's like, it's a bit scary to do all that?
Well, it's funny because I don't feel scared at all.
Right.
But I'm proud because if I stayed here, like I've got a really comfortable, amazing life. And, there's always a lot of reasons not to do these things. And I guess I'm just proud because I feel like over time I've been doing all this work on myself and healing. And so much of it is about like finding the voice and just being totally natural and free and just following the feelings that we have, like just really being, I don't know, like authentic and just doing exactly what you want to do and following exactly what it is you feel is aligned and your truth. And I'm proud of myself for doing that because I don't think I've been doing that I don't think I had been doing that for a long time. In many ways.
Wow.
Yeah.
So for you to finally recognize in yourself that you are actually going off on this voyage that you really want to do.
Yeah.
I can see why that would be something that you're proud of.
Yeah, there's like no inhibitions. I'm just free and like actually recognizing that I am. I'm doing it.
More power to you.
Yeah.
What is it that drives you every day?
What drives me every day? It all sounds like really hippie stuff that I'm saying, but I feel like a lot of what drives me is simply just the feeling of aliveness, like when I connect and with nature and in meditation and all of this, I just feel so energized by the sense of aliveness and the gratitude that I feel for it, that it's just it's so motivating because I feel like the more I connect with that sense of aliveness and gratitude and nature, it helps me to connect with my truth and therefore what I should be doing. Like it kind of, whatever it is that I'm meant to be doing, it unfolds very clearly. And so I find it very motivating because I see it reflected in my life. Opportunities come, whether it's work or being of service and these things, it all just feels so connected and so right because I feel connected to existence, I suppose.
Wow. That's a lot there.
I know.
That I'm trying to wrap my head around.
I know. The concepts are crazy, but that's truly just my honest answer.
Just feeling alive and
yeah,
just going out there, doing things that make you feel
in alignment with my own
with your
truth.
self.
Yeah.
Right. Being authentic.
Yeah.
Living an authentic life.
Yeah.
What's something you are afraid of?
Mediocrity. That's been my answer for so long. I'm so scared of having a really mediocre life and like getting old and realizing like, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I do that? Why, like just living like this half life.
It seems
terrifies me.
It seems to be a human problem, right? And satisfaction is quite common, right? And it seems to be that the more in tune you can be, the more you live in line with yourself and who you are, then the more satisfied your life is going to be.
Which is why it's so damn motivating, because when you do act in alignment with yourself, it is so fulfilling. Like it feels so full and you feel so content with what you've done.
Yeah, so I guess coming back to what drives you every day, it's like being in attunement, living in attunement with yourself.
Yes.
Is what drives you each day, because that just gives you more from life.
You get so much out of it. Exactly.
Now I understand.
Exactly. Yeah, we made it.
That's good.
Yeah. And I guess the reason I said all the meditation stuff is because that's how I access that feeling.
Right. Well, that works for you.
That's how I access it, is through connection with nature, connection with these things.
So you figured out the tools that you need to be your best self, and you kind of want to live, you want to work towards doing those every day.
For sure.
Why wouldn't you, right?
Why wouldn't you?
Then you're just wasting your life.
Yeah. And you know about it too.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Why eat pizza if you like noodles?
Well, that's the question, isn't it, sir?
That's the big question. Yeah. That was actually the next one. Well, I think I know what I'm going to get, but what do you believe is the meaning of life?
Oh, God. That's hilarious. What do I think is the meaning of life?
Why is there something rather than nothing?
Life is 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 life.
That'd be a good hook.
Yeah. The meaning of life. Far out. I say the same thing. Laughter, joy. I'm sure you knew I was going to say something like this. I don't know. Meaning, there is no meaning, but yet there's every meaning.
The paradox.
Yes. Yeah. I think there's something because there is also nothing.
Balance.
Or something. Yeah. Yeah. Whatever the answer is, it's very simple in my opinion.
Right. So you're kind of saying you don't know what it is, but you think you might know, and that thing isn't going to be complex.
No. But I'm also quite certain that I don't know anything.
Nothing. So am I.
Yeah, I'm quite certain. I don't know nothing. Yeah.
I think you know a little bit more than you think. Just quietly.
We're thinking too much is the problem.
What do you feel is the meaning of life?
Resentment, anger, frustration, tension.
Holding it in.
Holding it in.
Driving. All right. If someone you knew was struggling but didn't know how to reach out, what would you say to them?
But didn't know how to reach out. Probably something along the lines of, even if you feel like you're alone, you're never alone.
That is wonderful. That really resonated with whatever was going on inside my body. Because it's so reassuring. Because when you are feeling so terrible, you know, if you are depressed, if you don't want to live anymore, it's because you feel alone a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And if it's not that reason primarily, it's
there.
For me, it was there. So
Yeah.
hearing that is so important, because it's that reframe of your reality, because really there are lots of people who care about you.
Yes. And there is someone that will be willing to be there. Definitely. So yeah, something like that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, Nads. Cheers.
Welcome. Thanks for having me. it.